Good evening. I'm Nima and this is Forum Daily for Tuesday, November 22nd. And we start tonight in the Arctic, where Russian submarines and long-range aerial bombers have been reported. NORAD says Russia has been sending long-range bombers back over the Arctic toward North American airspace. Lieutenant General Alain Pelletier says Russian submarines are also operating off both coasts. This comes as Russia tries to demonstrate its ability to present a threat to North America. General Pelletier and other defense officials also told senators that Canada and the U.S. are working to modernize NORAD, which is North America's first line of defense against a foreign attack by air. Well, some disturbing news from Statistics Canada. The agency says the national homicide rate rose for a third consecutive year last year to 788. This is up 3% from 2020 and is the highest rate since 2015. The report also found nearly 1/4 of killings in 2021 were connected to gangs. Kevin Walby is an associate criminal justice professor at the University of Winnipeg, and he says that people are facing more social and economic struggles. He says this is because of the pandemic and inflation, which can push people towards riskier lifestyles. He says in order to curb violence, there needs to be more social supports, community support, job opportunities, and anti-violence training. In the nation's capital, testimony continued today during the final week of hearings at the Public Order Emergency Commission. Canada's Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino testified that the government's use of the Emergencies Act was necessary. He says this is because police tried to enforce the law to clear Freedom Convoy protesters, but were overwhelmed. He says officers were swarmed by protesters as they tried to do their jobs. This with threats being made against them and hundreds of criminal charges laid against people with the convoy. Mr. Mendicino says the blockade in Ottawa and at several border crossings also damaged Canada's economy and challenged police in a way not seen before. Meanwhile, Ottawa has also announced new sanctions on Belarus over its support of Russia's war in Ukraine. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly announced the new measures today. Canada is adding 22 Belarusian officials to the sanctions list. This includes 16 companies across the military, manufacturing, tech, engineering, banking, and rail sectors. All right, well, on the East Coast, 3 Atlantic provinces are going to be subject to the federal consumer carbon price starting next summer. A federal review determined the provincial systems in Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island, and Nova Scotia would no longer meet federal standards. The 3 provinces were able to use a provincial pricing program since the national requirements took effect in 2019. But that will no longer be the case after stronger federal carbon pricing rules kick in next year. In economic news, Statistics Canada says retail sales fell 0.5% in September, with $61.1 billion in sales across the country. StatsCan says a drop in sales at gas stations led the decrease, along with food and beverage stores. However, the agency says its initial estimate for October pointed to a gain of 1.5% for the month. However, it cautioned that the figure would be revised. Meanwhile, prairie grain movement to port has slowed down in recent weeks. This is due to ongoing rain, delaying unloading at the Port of Vancouver. David Shednovac with CN Rail says deliveries were at 626,000 metric tons in week 15, which ended November 12th. This is down from 809,000 metric tons in week 12. He says shutting down one part of the supply chain affects the entire grain movement system. Now, fortunately, there has not been an extended period of cold weather so far this fall, which slows down the speed that trains can travel. Turning to a new poll that finds that most British Columbians think the provincial government made the right call in not backing a proposed bid to host the Winter Olympics again. In a new Research Corporation poll, 57% of respondents said they strongly agree or moderately agree with the government's decision to not support the 2030 bid. It was being explored by the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Lil'wat First Nations. Nearly $31 million in relief donations received in the wake of post-tropical storm Fiona has been distributed by the Canadian Red Cross. The organization says most of that money has gone to Nova Scotia and PEI. Spokesman Dan Bettle says the agency had given $500 payments to more than 54,000 households as of last Thursday. He says nearly 6,000 households in Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland also received a second $500 payment. This was because of exceptional or unique needs. Stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back with a look at the longest goodbye with Shelly Calcagno up next. Losing a parent is always a hard experience, but losing someone before they're gone can be even more difficult. In her memoir, Shelly Calcagno shares the experience of Alzheimer's through the perspective of a loving daughter taking care of her mother. According to Shelly, her longest goodbye began when her mother forgot the word for dandelions, calling them yellow flowers instead. Now, this moment started a 10-year journey for Shelly that she calls the longest goodbye. Well, joining us now to tell us more about her book and the journey to help a loved one with Alzheimer's is Shelly Calcagno herself. Shelly, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hi, Nima. Thanks so much for having me today.
Now, I know this has been your passion project for quite a while. You said your longest goodbye started the moment your mother started showing signs of Alzheimer's. So how does it feel to have this journey documented, put into words, and now released for the world to see?
Well, it's been a very bittersweet journey for sure. I've said to numerous people in the last couple of weeks, I never wanted to write a book about losing my mom. It's not the topic I would have chosen. But when we were faced with this circumstance, I just felt like writing my journey and what our family's been through would hopefully bring encouragement to other people in the same path and hopefully hope for them on their journey as well.
Now, when it comes to the title of the book itself, The Longest Goodbye, it so effortlessly puts the experience of Alzheimer's into words from the perspective of a loved one. So tell us a little bit more about how you came up with this title.
Yes, well, Alzheimer's is often referred to as the long goodbye. And, the thing with this disease is that every person is different when they have Alzheimer's, and you never even quite know how long each stage will last, how long the entire journey will be. And it's really, for our family, it was 10 years of just saying goodbye. Like, it was a very long goodbye. And, sometimes there would be seasons where my mom would be at one stage for a certain amount of time, and then, things would change drastically, and then she would be at another stage. So, it's like kind of like step by step, stage by stage, you're always saying goodbye continually, and you're never quite sure what the next part of the journey is going to be like.
And your mom's development of Alzheimer's wasn't the first time you were exposed to Alzheimer's disease. Your uncles, your grandfather passed away due to Alzheimer's disease. So how did those experiences shape your journey with your mother?
Yes, it's very sad in our family that my mom is the fourth one in her family to have Alzheimer's. And I grew up, my mom's family was from Newfoundland, and I grew up in Ontario, so I didn't have a front seat to the whole process when it came to my family, but I definitely saw glimpses along the way, just of their strength and their courage and how they walked this road as well. So it's been obviously a painful thing for our family to go through, but I'm proud of our family. I'm proud of the example they've set and just how they've encouraged me in my journey as well.
And in addition to sharing your own raw personal journey with your mom's Alzheimer's disease, this book also addresses issues that a lot of people face when dealing with a loved one with Alzheimer's. So tell us a little bit more about how this book addresses caregiver fatigue and the mental health of caregivers themselves.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely in my story, in our family's story, my dad is the hero of our story in the way that he cared for our mom over the past 10 years. And I think it's really important. I remember at the beginning stages, it was hard for him to ask for help and to realize that he needed help. And I think that's the same for a lot of people on this journey. And I think I would encourage people, if you're starting a long goodbye journey, that, the best thing you can do is get resources in place for yourself. The Alzheimer's Association, they have offices and, across Canada and they just do incredible work. They helped our family so much. So I think for caregivers, getting that support in place early is just really key for their own well-being so that they can just be there for their loved one.
A very important message there, Shelly. Now, we've got just about a minute left here. We mentioned that your book was released just about last week, but what kind of responses have you been getting from people, especially people who have Alzheimer's in their family?
Well, it's still early, but I am getting messages from people just that that my book's bringing them hope and encouragement, and that's the point of my book. A lot of times in my journey, I felt really hopeless, and I didn't know where to look for joy. I didn't know where to look for gifts. So I hope this book will help people on their journey in the middle of this painful, this painful season of Alzheimer's. That it will encourage them that there are gifts to be found, that you can find hope, and that's really, the message of my book that I hope to share.
Absolutely beautiful message. Again, that was The Longest Goodbye by Shelly Calcagno. Be sure to search that online. Again, Shelly, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Nima.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break on Forum Daily News. The influential sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is warning the U.S. that it could face a more fatal security crisis. Her warning comes as Washington pushes for UN condemnation of the North's recent intercontinental ballistic missile test. Kim Yo-jong's warning came hours after U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield spoke at an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, and she said that the states will circulate a proposed presidential statement condemning North Korea's missile launches. Friday's test missile involved Pyongyang's most powerful Hwasong-17 missile, and some experts say the successful steep-angle launch proved its potential to strike anywhere in the U.S. mainland. Well, as the war in Ukraine continues, the country could be facing rolling blackouts all the way into March. This is due to what officials describe as the colossal damage done to Ukraine's power grid. The relentless Russian airstrikes have been pounding energy infrastructure for weeks, and Ukrainians have been told to stock up on supplies, evacuate hard-hit areas, or even think about leaving the country altogether. The onslaught has caused widespread blackouts and deprived millions of Ukrainians of electricity, heat, and water as winter rapidly approaches, threatening millions of people. Rescue efforts are continuing after a deadly earthquake in Indonesia. Rescuers are using jackhammers, circular saws, and sometimes their bare hands to shift the rubble of flattened buildings as they search for the dead and missing. The death toll has risen to at least 268. This comes after a 5.6 magnitude earthquake struck the island of Java yesterday. More than 1,000 people have been injured by collapsing buildings and debris. Hospitals near the epicenter of the densely populated island have been overwhelmed. All right, well, in the U.S., the likelihood of a strike that could paralyze rail traffic is rising. This comes after the largest of 12 rail unions rejected the latest contract offer on Monday. That offer included 24% raises and $5,000 in bonuses. There's no immediate threat of a strike, even though 4 unions have rejected deals, which the Biden administration helped to broker before the original strike deadline in September. Now, those unions agreed to try to hash out a contract before a new December 5th strike deadline. The Retail Industry Leaders Association says a rail strike at the height of the holiday shopping and travel season would cause enormous disruption. On the other side of the world, Australia's parliament has passed bilateral free trade agreements with India and the UK. It is now up to those partner nations to bring the deals into force. Australia needs to diversify its exports from the troubled Chinese market, and Britain has had to forge new bilateral trade relations since it left the European Union. The bills easily passed the House of Representatives on Monday, and the Senate made them law on Tuesday. The deals need to be ratified by the respective UK and Indian parliaments before they would take effect at least 30 days later. The World Cup controversy continues. America's top diplomat has criticized a decision by FIFA to threaten players at the World Cup with yellow cards if they wear armbands supporting inclusion and diversity. Speaking alongside his Qatari counterpart, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said it is always concerning to see any restrictions on freedom of expression, and especially so when the expression is for diversity and for inclusion. He added, quote, "No one on a football pitch should be forced to choose between supporting these values and playing for their team." Back in the U.S., an Army veteran who helped to subdue the gunman at an LGBTQ plus nightclub in Colorado Springs on Saturday night credits his military training and instincts in helping him to disarm the attacker. Rich Fierro told reporters on Monday how he grabbed the gunman's body armor and began punching him. He and another man stopped the shooter after he began spraying bullets inside Club Q, killing 5 people and wounding 17. Mr. Fierro's daughter's boyfriend was among those killed. It is being called one of the greatest World Cup upsets of all time. Saudi Arabia's jubilant players ran in all directions after scoring one of the biggest World Cup upsets ever against Argentina. Argentina slumped to a 2-1 loss in a deflating start to Lionel Messi's quest to win the one major title that has eluded him. The loss ended Argentina's 36-match unbeaten run, and Saudi Arabia has declared a national holiday on November 23rd to celebrate the victory. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. You could also watch all of our commentary, programming, and interviews on the News Forum YouTube channel. All right, thanks again for joining us today on Forum Daily News, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, Canada.